All right, Shavua Tov, a good vach. We are going to continue Bezrat Hashem today, the fourth part in this episode of Keys to Redemption in Our Hand, episode 31. This is part 4 of this very fundamental talk, and which is titled by us, Are You Ready for Moshiach? In this talk, the Rebbe very, very strongly charges primarily his shluchim, his emissaries, with the task to prepare the world for Mashiach. And this is their final task of their shlichus. But it's not only limited to the shluchim, it is tasked on every single person in the generation. It means all of us. Each and every one of us has to help prepare ourselves and the world for Mashiach. The leader of the generation has given this charge to everybody. That means that God is expecting that from each and every one of us for the last 32 years. Obviously, we're feeling it right now. The pressure is on that this is where we're holding now. And now, for sure, this should be in our mind all day long. How can we inspire people to recognize, to appreciate, and understand that Moshiach is literally here? And the events that we've been seeing this year, as painful, as intense as they are all the prelude to the redemption. We don't understand everything, but that's what's happening. And we should be readying ourselves every moment more and more and more. But we're also responsible to ready other people, to inspire other people, to teach other people. In any case, in the last class, we were learning that idea, that's what the shluchim need to do, that the Rebbe said in Parshas Chayei, to ready ourselves for the coming of Mashiach. He explains that this is not just happens to be right now the most important job, and therefore the shluchim, which are his agents, are kind of being focused towards that particular message, but rather that is really the intention of the shlichus to very begin with. In other words, the very, very foundation of the entire shlichus entity, which started in Chabad in the 1940s by the previous Rebbe, and then continued on in 1950 by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then became this massive world organization that has such effect on the Jewish people, that from the very get-go, it was really about bringing Mashiach. Because Mashiach himself, the Rebbe says, is a shaliach. We learned earlier, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe asks Hashem, when God asks Moses to go take the Jewish people out of Egypt, Moshe objects, and one of his objections that you should send in the hands of the one that you will send. And as we explain, it's referring to Mashiach, and he uses the term biyad asher tishlach. Tishlach means your agent, the one that you're going to send. So I'm not going to go over the whole thing, because you can listen to class number 1, 2, and 3, where all of this is discussed. But the main thing the Rebbe derives from there is that Mashiach is a shliach, and that Moshe, and the point of Moshe's request was that he wanted to connect his mission, because he was also on a mission to redeem the Jewish people, that the two missions of the first Redeemer and the latter Redeemer should become intertwined and interlooped one with the other. That Moshe's mission to take the Jewish people out of Egypt should be the beginning of the future redemption, and that Mashiach should be the conclusion of the first redemption, and that the energies of Moshe and the energies of Mashiach should become fused together. And as we're going to understand the significance of that is in today's class. We also learned that this cosmic shlichus, this most important mission that is given to Moshiach and to given to Moshe. And each and every one of us plays a role in it, as we're going to see today as well, as we're all part of that great grand shlichus, that great mission. It all begins with Abraham, with Avram, and it began with the first shlichus, when Avraham sends Eliezer, his servant, to be a shliach to bring about the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, of Yitzchak and Rivka. And the Rebbe proved, it was a whole discussion we had in the previous class, that we could learn that maybe he wasn't a shliach, maybe he was just a shapchen, maybe he was just a matchmaker. And the Rebbe proves that no, he was a shliach, and really that shlichus is really the root of all shlichus. That was like the opening shlichus. It was the mission, and it was the first time someone acted as an agent. And we learned in the last class the significance of him being sent as an agent, in which the point of an agent is that the agent is not an entity unto himself. The agent is working completely and entirely for the interests of the one that he is working for. Not like a matchmaker who is an independent being who has personal interests and is just suggesting a nice match or maybe helping out with a match and so on and so forth. The difference between an employee who, to a certain degree, is completely devoted to the work that the employer is sending him, or rather a freelancer, someone who works for himself and he's just taking on a job. And obviously, a freelancer has much more independence. So the shliach, what we're emphasizing over here, is shliach is not that way. The shliach is completely devoted to the interests of the one that's sending him, so much so that he becomes, and he has power of attorney, which means the power to execute things, documents, agreements, and be held accountable, and make the one who sends him be subjected to the deeds and the actions of the shliach. And the reason is because the shliach somehow becomes unattachable and becomes a part of the one who sent him. It's like the identity of the sender becomes extended to the shliach, and the shliach now is, as the sages in Talmudic halachic terms, shluchai shel adam kamoisai, an emissary, an agent of a person, is as the person himself. And that's the idea. Now, why did Eliezer? So he explained that Eliezer was that shliach. And why was that? So we learned in the last class, because we find something else over here that was really astonishing. And that is that we see that Avraham, gave it his entire being, his everything he gave to the shlichus. He didn't leave anything out of this, as the verse describes, that Avram took all of his wealth and he gave, and he bequeathed it, or that would be the word, something like that. He transferred his entire wealth on a document to Yitzchak, like Rashi says, to Isaac, but he gave that document to Eliezer. So Eliezer had now control in order to bring about this shlichus, in order to execute this mission. Eliezer had now the full wealth of Abraham. Avram didn't leave a penny for himself. And we asked the question, why would he do that? And in the earlier class, we explained that's because this marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka was going to be the pillar, the foundation stone of all of Israel and all of the Jewish people. And since Abraham's main identity is to father the great nation, God's nation in this world, to father the Jewish people, so therefore Avram had to give it. It wasn't like it's not like, as we discussed last class, like he's giving for some cause. And there's always limits how much you can give for a cause. You have an existence outside of the cause, and therefore for yourself. There's important causes. There's many important causes. Charity, we can find so many important causes, but there are limits. Person is not recommended according to Torah to give everything away for any cause. But this is not any cause, as we learned last week. This is Abraham's identity. This is his entire being. So for yourself, your money is yours. You can spend all your money on yourself because this is you. This is your very life. So therefore, Avram, this marriage was to create, this couple was going to be the father of all of the Jewish people. And Abraham knows he has only one son that's going to father the great nation. And if the son doesn't get married, then there is no great nation. And there's no Sinai, and there's no Torah, and the purpose of creation, which Avram was chosen to facilitate, which Abraham was chosen to facilitate, will not come to fruition. And therefore, for this, he's got to give it his all. And therefore, when he chooses someone to be his agent to do this, he has to make sure that the person who's executing it is also giving it his all. And therefore cannot have one hair of himself that's not part of it. Eliezer has to be all in, just like Abraham is all in. So this is what we learned in the earlier class. We also began to explain, this was the next idea in the talk, that really, spiritually, it also is on a deeper level. In other words, on the simple level, yes, we're creating the first family physically, which through them the Jewish people are going to come out. But even on the spiritual dynamics of what the Jewish people represent in this world, and what the ultimate goal of creation is, and what the ultimate, and the people who have to realize the purpose of creation. What is that all about? That is all about the fusion of the godly with creation, the divine and the world, the fusion of spirit and matter, the fusion of the holy and the otherworldly with the world. That's the purpose of creation, to create in this physical world a home for God. That's what it's all about. And therefore, and obviously when Moshiach will come, that will be realized to its fullest. The physical world will be heavenly. Earth will be godly. There will not be any entity. There won't be a speck in the universe that will not be radiating divine truth. Everything will experience God. That is the ultimate purpose of creation. The Jewish people were given that job to fulfill that. And therefore, where does it all start? It really becomes, this fusion is made possible at Sinai, when God comes down on a physical mountain, and he gives the Jewish people commandments which are going to express the union of spirit and matter, because every commandment in the Torah is all a physical action expressing a godly interest. So godly and a godly interest, the will of God is God himself. So when you do an act of God's interest in this world, and it's done with the physical objects of this world, whether with one's own physical body or with the substances of time and space, all the elements in this world, we fuse time and space and everything that's in it with God. And we create a permanent fusion and a permanent oneness with Hashem in the world, the home for Hashem in this world. It started at Sinai. But we know that every single thing that we, the Jewish people, accomplish, we couldn't do it without our forebearers, our ancestors, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, without them doing it first. So they need to do it first. They are the trailblazers. They paved the way. And once they did it, we can then get it done after that. So where was it done in the lives of our fathers? To a certain degree, we discussed in the earlier classes, it was done during the circumcision of Abraham, and also when God promised Abraham the land of Israel. These were two forms of expression of that idea. Circumcision means taking God, the name of God, and literally printing it on the body. The covenant of God, which is God. The covenant of God is God. And imprinting that on the body is the fusion of Hashem and the physical world. Also associated with that, we learned was God granting Abraham a physical land that belongs to him, the land of Israel. Why was it so important? As we learned, the theme of the entire book, Parsha Bereshis, is because this is really the theme of it all, the purpose of it all, that a regular piece of real estate that is part of a world that is generally mundane should now become holy land. Jewish land, holy land, godly land. So that's the purpose. But in taking it to the next level, it was the empowerment to fuse these forces together, reached a whole new level in the next generation. And that is Isaac and Rebekah. Because as holy as Abraham is, Isaac is much holier. The reason is because Isaac is the first one to be born a Jew. As I read something really beautiful this week, in the name of, who was the one who said this? Forgot already. Some Hasidic master. The three patriarchs. Maybe it wasn't even. Maybe it was Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner. I'm not sure. I read this, and there's a new beautiful chumash by Rabbi Tauber, Yankee Tauber. I forgot the name of the chumash, but it's just spectacular. It's just Genesis, just Bereshit. It's a thick book, and they just released the first one on Bereshit. It's full of gems. So over there, he brings in the name of someone, the three patriarchs. Abraham is the first person to become a Jew. Isaac, Yitzchak, is the first person to be born a Jew. And Jacob is the first person to bring about the perseverance of the Jewish people, that Judaism will last and burrow through to the very end. Because in Abraham and Isaac, they had children that were not Jewish. But Jacob, Yaakov, all of his children are Jewish, which means he is the first one to assure that the lineage of the Jewish people will continue forever. In any case, Isaac, therefore, is holier than Abraham. To put it in simple words, Yitzchak, is born on the top, on the peaks, on the highest mountain. He is an angelic being to a certain degree from birth. And he's the first one to have a circumcision at 8 days old. So from his very, 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 very infancy, he is a godly being. Not only that, he was so holy that he was offered up as a sacrifice. Took up to the mountain, and he was sanctioned and sanctified with the holiness of the sacrifice. And he retained that holiness. That's why God warns Isaac that he's not allowed to go out of the land of Israel. He has to stay in the land of Israel. Abraham also, when he's seeking a wife, like the story that we're learning now, to seek a wife for Yitzchak, he warns Eliezer, don't you dare take my son. If the girl doesn't want to come, don't you dare bring my son outside of the land of Israel. My son Isaac, he's the holy of holies. So Isaac is very holy. Rebekah, Rivka, she's also a big Rebbitzin. She becomes the matriarch of the Jewish people, but she didn't begin that way. She wasn't born to righteous people. She was born in a wicked family full of wicked people, and a very, very, very unholy and in a very contaminated environment. She is a rose amongst the thorns. So she represents the divine potential that is buried in earth. Isaac represents godly light that is coming from above, pure godliness. Isaac represents heaven, and Rebekah represents earth. And taking these two people, Isaac and Rebekah, and overnight, didn't take long. It wasn't like Rebekah then was plucked from the darkness and that she needed to go through a deprogramming and a washing and some kind of a spiritual cleansing that you might say should have taken her a couple of years until she would be worthy to be able to marry Isaac, who is such a tzaddik. He's already 40 years old at that time, and he's climbed the ladders from when he was born on top of the mountain. Can you imagine how high he reached through his 40 years of the deepest, educated by Abraham and Sarah, and then grown higher and higher and higher to the peaks of unimaginable greatness? And Rebekah, she's just a little girl, and she's coming from a very corrupted environment. Overnight, they were married, they were a husband and wife, and they become one flesh. They become one spirit and one flesh. That personifies the union of heaven and earth. At that moment, the Torah was given in a nutshell. The seeds of the giving of the Torah, because that's what the Torah is. In 1 minute, you can take earth and merge it to become one with heaven. A physical entity can become actually, literally a piece of God. when we do a mitzvah with it. How can that happen? It's an infinite elevation. The power of the giving of the Torah, power of the mitzvot. And who initiated this? Where did it start? This was the enormity of Eliezer's mission. Eliezer's mission to bring about this marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka is the fusion of the Hashem and the world, of God and the world. And that's the reason why this marriage is everything. This marriage is the entire purpose of Israel and the entire purpose of creation. And that's the reason why Abraham is going to give it all that he's got. Everything. Now, it's very important over here that we introduce the Kabbalistic terms for this phenomenal idea. The Rebbe is now going to run with a certain Kabbalistic formula. And he describes it that the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka is considered, according to the mystics, the union of Ma and Ban. What is Ma and Ban? Briefly, you can study about this hundreds and hundreds of discourses. So much Hasidus, so many pages of Kabbalah and mysticism discuss these concepts. But in a nutshell, Ma and Ban are two names of God. Ma, both of them are derived. Let me say what the literal meaning Ma and Ban is. Ma and Ban are two numbers. Ma is 45 and Ban is 52. They represent two dynamics of divine energies. These numbers are the numeric value of God's name. Hashem's name equals 26. The Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, equals 26. However, there are hidden letters that are not on the surface. But when you look deeper into the four letters of God's name, just like there are hidden letters, just like every letter has hidden letters. So if you have the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. So when you look at an Aleph, you only see the letter Aleph, the design of an Aleph, right? That's an Aleph. But the word Aleph, if you say the word Aleph, you hear that there's other letters there. Aleph, Lamed, Pei. There's more letters. So these are called hidden letters. It's called the Miloi, the filling letters. So Yud Kei Vav Kei has hidden letters. But the spelling can be spelled in various ways. There are four different ways of how to spell the hidden letters of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which result in four. If the letters that are hidden, this is a mystical concept. If the letters that are hidden are exchanged, and being that every letter is a different number, the resultant adding up is going to result with another number for God's name. So if you fill God's name with Alephs, then your numeric, not every letter, but you fill the Vav with an Aleph, and the two Heys are spelled Hey Aleph, the numeric value of that is going to be 45. If you fill God's names with Heys, the Vav is obviously not going to have a Hey, because you can't stick a Hey inside the Vav, so the Vav is just going to be Vav, but the two Heys of Hashem's name in God's name are going to be filled with each one with another Hey, then the numeric value of that is going to be 52. There's another two numbers that it can be, but we're not going to, but in this talk, he's not talking about it. He's speaking about two names of God. One is 45, which the Hebrew letter for 45 is Mem. The Hebrew letters are Mem, Hey. Mem is 40, Hey is 5. And that is called the name of God of 45. There's another name of God, which is 52. That's, as we said earlier, when we fill it with, when we fill it with Heys, then it's 52. When we fill them with Alephs, then it's 45. 45 is called Shem Ma, because Ma is Mem Hey, and 52 is called Shem Ban, because 52 is Nun Beis, is 52. So we spell it backwards, Ban, Beis, Nun, 52. And that is a Kabbalistic concept. But what does it mean in terms of our discussion? It means as follows. The name of 45 represents, again, very generally speaking, an energy flow of God that flows directly from Hashem without any concealments, without any blockages. So these projected lights are very, very much completely one with God. And they are very in tune with their source. And if the name Ma these energies produce something, whoever that being is going to be a being that is fully cognizant to the deepest and highest levels of God's power, and that it is nothing other than a projection of God. And therefore it will cry out about itself that I am Ma, I am what? Ma, in addition to being 45, also is a word that means what. It creates a reality of what. What is the reality of what? It means the most humble of existence. It says about Moses that Moses said about himself, I am what? Which means I am identityless. I am nobody. Because even though he's the greatest human being, but he is so sharply aware that there is nothing to him other than the divine input. So he's nothing. It's just a flow of God. God is everything. So he's a flow of God's light. So any creature being who is receiving a flow of God's light that is not filtered, that is coming without concealments, that's the energy of Ma, the energy of 45. So the energies of 45 generally create the supernal worlds above that melt completely into God. In other words, the realms of holiness in general are considered the product of the name of Ma. Okay? So Isaac, for instance, who was born on the highest levels of divine consciousness, he's the son of Avraham and Yitzchak. And by the way, Avram, in his name, if you take the word Avram, the Rebbe doesn't say it in the Sikha here and the talk over here, but it's in many places in Chassidus. You take the word Abraham and you break it up, you get the word Aver Ma, which means the limb of 45. Meaning to say Abraham's very existence was a channel for 45 energy. So Isaac, who was born from Abraham, when Abraham is already 99 years old, he reaches the highest peaks of complete nullification, of complete surrender, of complete oneness with God. Abraham, who is in such a high level, produces a son Isaac, so we can understand that Isaac is, who is he? He is an entity of Ma. Fine. What's 45? What's 52? 52 is a whole different reality. 52 is the energies of God. 52 is also Hashem's name. But God's broken, splintered pieces of him that have fallen into all the dark stuff in creation. The name of 52 it's the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's Hashem's name, but it's God allowing himself to be broken through what was once called the shattering of the vessels. Hashem intentionally, when he created the world, wanted a world where there will be a struggle between good and evil, and that good will prevail and the world will be rectified. But in order for the world to be rectified, there first needs to be a mess. So Hashem created the possibility of a mess. How did he do that? He first emanated powerful lights, but he produced vessels to receive those lights, which they're going to be these are going to be the underlying channels through which he's going to create the world, through these vessels, whatever that means. But these vessels were incompatible with the lights. And what happened was, because these lights were too intense, the vessels shattered. Because these vessels shattered, these vessels then became points of energy that are, through a series of, only God knows, a whole system, these vessels shattered and fell and produce a world that is filled with darkness and can perpetuate evil and Hamas and all the people that support Hamas and all the ugliness that you see in this world, including, in general, the material physical world, which at first glance and in its original state is not holy and not godly, lives in godly ignorance, lives in a state of ignorance. The state of the sparks of holiness before they are redeemed is they're trapped in husks of darkness. So, but there was divine potential over there. That divine potential that is buried within the world is called the name of 52. These are sparks from the name of 52. When they're elevated, when they're extracted, they are actually higher than the Ma energies, the 45 energies. When they're not extracted, when they're still in the darkness, then it's very low. But once it's pulled out and it is elevated, it rises even higher than the one that came down to elevate. So an example of the ban is our bodies. The example of the Ma energy is our soul. Our soul is much loftier than our body. Our soul is cognizant of God. Our soul is in a state of subservience to God. Our soul is a spiritual being that only wants to do God's will. That's our soul. Our body has all kinds of other ideas. Our body has urges and wants and negative traits and all kinds of stuff that are very unholy. But the body has enormous potential. If the body submits to the soul and the soul gains mastery over the body, then the potential of the body can be used to serve God. And that means that the forces of Ma are elevating, they're being infused. When the soul is infused with the body, and body and soul function in unison, interwoven and interlaced with each other, and the soul makes the body fulfill God's will, then these sparks, the potential of the body is then elevated, and then in the future world, the body's holiness is going to even surpass the soul. Because the body, the power of the name of Ban, of 52, is really higher than 45. In its current state, it's lower, but eventually it's higher. So Rivka, who is a diamond in the rough, she's surrounded by darkness. She is the power of Ban. Just give me a minute because that phone is ringing and ringing. It's making me meshuggah. Just want to make sure that it's not an emergency here. Just give me a second. Oh. I remember the trunk at the beginning at 9 and I forgot minutes in the class. Okay, so if you want to come to 9 at 9:30, let's do that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this diffusion of Ma and Ban needs to unify together, and that is the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka as they. So now we understand that these two dynamics is the purpose of all of creation. Eliezer is the one who needs to facilitate this fusion of Ma and Ban. That's why very interesting. The Rebbe says that when Eliezer introduces who he is, he says, I am a servant of Abraham. That's how he opens his statement. When he comes to the house and they ask him, tell us your story. What are you all about? You came over here with 10 camels. What's this all about? He says, I am a servant of Abraham. What's the emphasis? What's the meaning of I am a servant of Abraham? The meaning of that is, the statement of that is, that Abraham's business, the role of Abraham in the world, is to initiate this fusion, to bring heaven down to earth, to connect spirit and matter. That's the purpose of Abraham in this world. So Eliezer is identifying and declaring his mission. I'm here as a realization of what Abraham is all about. As we discussed earlier, Abraham in his own body had already this fusion of heaven and earth, of Ma and Ban. It happened to him. But now in this marriage, it's going to take on a whole new, it's going to break through on a whole new level. So therefore he says, I am the servant of Abraham. This is my identity. Light comes out from this whole talk over here. The identity of a shaliach, say one of the shluchim of the Rebbe. You have thousands of them across the world. What's their identity? Their identity is they're a shliach of the Rebbe. But what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that your business is bringing Mashiach. That's who you are. You are here to bring Mashiach. This is every action that we do is to bring Mashiach, only to bring Mashiach. It's not that you're here to bring Jews close to Judaism, to spread Judaism. It's not that you're here to spread goodness and kindness. It's not that you're here to spread the teachings of Hasidus. That's all details. Yes, that's how you bring Mashiach. But what are you here? What's your identity? I'm a servant of Abraham, which means I am, in this case, what Eliezer starts, what Abraham starts, Mashiach concludes. And therefore, you are an agent to bring Mashiach. That's what a shliach is. That's the same thing as with Eliezer. I'm an agent of Abraham. I'm here to bring. However, now the Rebbe asks, this is very special. Okay, so now we understand why Abraham has to give his all, because this idea of fusing Ma and Ban, it's the purpose of everything. Everything was created for this purpose. But he says, what still needs explanation is, according to this, the main accomplishment that happened in this story of the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah is that these two souls got married. That Isaac and Rebekah, Yitzhak and Rivka are married. Yitzhak is heaven. Rivka is the potential of earth. The two of them unify together, and there is a fusion of these two powerful dynamics of Ma and Ban. Ma, that which is expressive of God. Ban, the potential buried in that which is separated from God, and the fusion of both of them. So then the main story should have been about Yitzhak and Rivka getting married. The truth is, it doesn't say much about Yitzhak and Rivka's wedding. It just says Yitzhak brings her to her tent and he loved her. It's all. It doesn't say, and he was comforted after his mother. Doesn't describe the romance between them. It doesn't describe their life together that much. It just describes the short description. He brings her to. However, the story and preparing it, the whole story of Eliezer, goes on and on and on, as we discussed in the previous class. It's repeated twice in the Torah. Why so much about the mission that brings the two together? Why not spend the time about the fusion itself? So we have to say that the secret of the fusion of Ma and Ban is not just the end result, the fusion, but what does it take to make that fusion happen? What does it take to bring about that fusion? What it takes to bring about the fusion is Eliezer and his mission. Eliezer is the one sent to fuse the two together. And in order for Eliezer to accomplish that, this is so brilliant, the Rebbe says, listen to this. In order for Eliezer to accomplish that, Eliezer has to create a fusion in himself, because you can only impact something outside of you if you first have that dynamic inside of you. So Eliezer has to first bring about within himself this fusion of Ma and Ban. What is that? The being on the one hand one with God, and being on the other hand separated, and taking a separateness and attaching it. That's the whole idea. So how does it play out in Eliezer? It manifests in Eliezer in the very idea the Rebbe says that he had to be a shliach. And he has to operate in a very interesting way. On the one hand, because he's a shliach, in other words, The role that he is given is to be a shliach, because the shliach is the perfect fusion of these two powers, of being both unified with the one who's sending you, but also separate. Number one in being a shliach is if you're making someone an agent to something, that agent has to have a mind of his own. You cannot make a minor a shliach, because a minor is not considered that he has a developed mind. You have to be, according to Torah, an adult, a girl 12 years old, a boy 13 years old. That's the age of adulthood, where you consider to have a mind, you're a thinking person. Now, if I'm making you an agent, that means you're working on my behalf, and I have a mind, so why do you have to have a mind? You're just working on my behalf. The answer is no, you can't make a shliach. When you're making a shliach, you're appointing an emissary, you're appointing an agent. You have to appoint someone who is a being unto himself. He's not you. He has a mind to his own. He has an understanding. He maybe has interests of his own and a life of his own, his or her own. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, the shliach needs to exit themselves and completely devote themselves, in as much within the context of this shlichus, within the work that they are doing now on behalf of the other. They have to completely devote themselves to the interests of the one that's sending them, without any personal gain or personal motive that is driving them. If they have personal interests, and therefore when they're doing what they're doing, they're not doing it to the fullest based on the will and the interest and the well-being of the one who's sending them, then they cease to be an agent. That's why if an agent changes a little bit from the explicit direction that the person sent them, then they become invalid. Their actions are no more considered valid, and the person who sent them is not bound by the contract that they signed. If you appoint the power of attorney and you explicitly gave him a certain guideline based on what you're interested in, and they violated that, they lose their authority as power of attorney. They don't have that power anymore. An agent is only an agent as long as he's acting on behalf of what the person sent him for. So on the one hand, the person is someone else. Not again, you're not sending yourself. A shliach is not even your child. It's a stranger. It's a being who's completely independent. But yet that being who's completely independent now becomes hitched up with you to the point that they become part of you. They surrender themselves completely to your interest. But that doesn't mean that they don't retain any more a self. They retain a self, because when you're sending the agent, you don't have to spell out exactly how, what, and where, and when. You can leave the decisions to that person. Just like to an attorney, when you make them, you leave them the power to decide what's good, what's best for you. They have to be acting for your interest, but they can use their own mind in figuring out what's good for you. What is that? That's a fusion of separateness and yet oneness. So since Eliezer now was going to bring about the first fusion of heaven and earth, of these two energies, of the energy of being one with God, but with something that is separated, and yet bringing the separation into the oneness. So Eliezer himself had to have that duality within himself, those two elements. That's why he had to be a shliach. And that's why Abraham bestowed an oath upon him, very strongly, exactly what his interests are. You to go there, find someone from my family, and so on and so forth, make sure it's the right person for my son. But the actual doing, Eliezer did on his own, which means he had to make decisions on his own. He prayed on his own. He made a sign on his own. Abraham didn't tell him what the sign would be. He had to figure it out to the best of his knowledge, what would be the best way to fulfill the interest of his master. And he actually brought about the results were on the highest level of perfection. He accomplished it 100%. By being what? By himself being that fusion. Now the Rebbe says, so this applies to each and every one of us. In terms of we're all, as we said earlier, we're all agents to fuse heaven and earth, to bring about the unity of Ma and Ban. Being that we're the agents, as a shliach, we too constitute these two things, these two powers. Our soul is a piece of God from above. It's melted in divine truth. It has no beingness of itself. It is completely one with Hashem. It's the Ma energy inside of us. Our bodies have a mind of their own. Our body itself is a body. A body doesn't feel much. But when the soul comes into the body, when God drops the soul down through the various different levels of world and puts it into a body, the soul now starts becoming influenced by the body. The body is not necessarily holy. The body on its own doesn't gravitate to God's will. Quite on the contrary, the body naturally gravitates to self-fulfillment, to selfish things. And a lot of times those selfish things completely contradict God's will, and the soul has to struggle. But what the soul has to do is the soul has to overpower the body. And to live a Jewish life means to live a life where our soul is dominating over our body. Our spiritual drives and our spiritual mission overcomes the instinctive animalistic urges and drives of the body, and the soul has to uplift the body, and with the body the soul is going to do God's will, and ultimately what it means is that there shouldn't be any experience that is considered pure body. Everything in our life should be a mergence of soul and body where the soul dominates. That's the fusion of Ma and Ban. And when we do that within ourselves, then we can be impactful in the world. And then everything we touch, we can draw down through the mitzvah that we do. The lights of Hashem should connect to the physical sparks, to the physical material of the world with the sparks that are in them, and fuse the two together. So as a shliach, and that's why what characterizes each and every one of us during our physical lifetime in this world is that we are a shliach of Hashem. We are all emissaries of God. We are agents of God. Because the agent is that phenomenon that is represented in the fusion of body and soul. Body is the ban part, is the part that's the worldly part, the separated element from God. Soul is the attached part, and the fusion of the soul and the body and the ramifications that come from this fusion is the purpose of creation. Now we'll also understand, as we mentioned earlier, why Abraham puts his everything into it, because this fusion is the purpose of this. This incorporates everything in all of history. This incorporates all of the cosmos. Every element in all of eternity, from the beginning of time to the end of time, is connected to this fusion. And then he says in chapter 8, based on this, we'll find something very interesting. This whole concept that the marriage of Eliezer, that Yitzchak and Rivka, of Isaac and Rebekah, is this fusion of these two divine names, of these two divine powers. It's interesting that it's a teaching of the Alter Rebbe. However, this teaching of the Alter Rebbe is not stated in Parshas Chayei Sarah, but rather it is stated in Likutei Torah, and in the end portion of all the way in the end of the book of Likutei Torah. Now, Likutei Torah is a book of Hasidic discourses on the three latter parts of the Torah: Vayikra, Leviticus, Bamidbar, Numbers, and Devarim, Deuteronomy. This story of Isaac and Rebekah is in Genesis, is in Bereshis. So why does the Alter Rebbe stick it in? It's in the last Torah portion in Parshas V'zos HaBracha, which is the last Torah portion in Deuteronomy, which we read on Simchas Torah. That's where he talks about this union of Yitzchak and Rivka through Eliezer and the importance of this mission. Why does he wait? Why does he put it all the way over there? It should have been in this week's Torah portion, not this week's, Parshas Chayei Sarah. That's where it should have been placed. But the Rebbe says this is why the Alter Rebbe put it there, because that's really the purpose of all of creation. The purpose, the end of the book, the Rebbe says, represents the sum totality of everything that we've done, summarizing all of Judaism, summarizing all the tasks of all the generations together. Where is it all heading to? It's heading to this marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, this fusion of Yitzchak and Rivka, to bring the two of them together to cause this marriage. What happens after the Zos HaBracha is Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs. That's the only part that's after. In the book of Likutei Torah, the only discourses that follow it are discourses based on explaining Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. What is that? Why did that come after? Because once we achieve fusion of God and the world, God and Israel, once we achieve the fusion of Hashem and his wife, that's this marriage, that afterwards we live happily ever after. So Shir HaShirim is already discussing life as it's going to be once we're fused already, once we're completely one with God. But all the work we're doing now is to take all the pieces that are still separated and unify them. We're not yet experiencing the life of the union until it's over, until we completed the full task. Until then, we're busy connecting all the pieces. The Rebbe connects it also to the beginning of Likutei Torah. The beginning of Likutei Torah, the first discourse on Likutei Torah, which is on Sefer Vayikra, and in the Parsha Vayikra, it's not the first discourse, but it's the first discourse in the main book, which is Parsha Vayikra. Over there, the Alter Rebbe talks about the concept that every soul is an emissary of God. It's the same concept, because an emissary is this union. And the Alter Rebbe says that a soul being an emissary of God, an emissary is considered like the sender, has the power of the sender, that every soul has the power of God himself, is representing, and is as if the soul is Hashem himself. Based on that, we're just going to finish. I'm going to have to finish the class a little earlier than I wanted, so we're going to add more tomorrow. But based on all of this, we'll understand why Moshiach is called a Shaliach. Since we understand now fundamentally what Shaliach is, that Shaliach is a fusion of, on the one hand, being an entity for yourself, on the other hand, completely surrendering yourself to a mission, and to act not based on what you think you want, but what your one who sent you. In that you have your own creative space where you can create and do it the way you feel is the best. But you have to be completely devoted to the interest of the one who sent you. And that's the union that happens within ourselves in order to be able to realize the shlichus in the world. Since Mashiach is going to be the one who completes the task of all the generations, so therefore he's the full culmination of being a shliach, and he's God's shliach to redeem the Jewish people. And therefore, when God sends Mashiach, he sends him as his emissary. Because since Mashiach is going to bring the grand totality of all the work, which is the fusion of something that's separated with God, Mashiach has to have that fusion inside of him. The Rebbe says, where do you see Mashiach has that fusion inside of him? On the one hand, Mashiach is a human being. There is an opinion in the Talmud that says that the Jewish people don't have Mashiach, and God himself will be Mashiach. And his name Hillel is the one who says that. Not Hillel, the sage of the Mishnah, Hillel, the sage of the Talmud, a latter Hillel. And the sages in the Talmud shoot it down very simply, and they don't accept that view. It's a view, but we don't accept it. Moshiach, the one who completes the work of all of humanity, he is a human being. The Rebbe brings, he's a king, a human being, studies Torah, does mitzvahs like his grandfather David. That's what it says in Maimonides. He has to even fight the wars of God, which means he first, in his initial stages, he's not appears on the scene, snaps his fingers, and immediately the world is godly. No, he fights the battles of darkness while he's alive and while he's the leader already. There are forces that fight him, which means he's still living in a world that's still detached. His final job is to bring about the final union of creation with God. So the fact that he himself is human, plus he's living in a world that is still unholy, indicates that side of Mashiach where he's separated from God. Yet on the other hand, he is the agent of God. Since he's the agent of God, he becomes literally like God. Mashiach is literally, the power in him is God's power. He is literally an agent of God, and an agent of God is Hashem. So Mashiach is on that level of being literally one with Hashem. And that's how Mashiach, being both on the one hand human and the other one a shliach of God, that's how Mashiach causes the fusion of the soul. And because when Mashiach will come, all of our souls our souls and bodies will be perfectly harmonized. Today's days, our souls and bodies are not perfectly harmonized. A lot of times, our soul is our bodies function in ways that our soul is not happy, and the body is not surrendered to the soul, and the soul is weeping and very unsatisfied with what the body is doing, like when we do a sin or something. So that causes pain to the soul. So you see, there's a lack in harmony. Once Mashiach comes, that won't be possible anymore. Our physical existence will be a complete expression of our soul. And not only that, he's going to unify spirit and matter in the entire world. And if in order for him to do that, he himself has to be a shliach. Just like the person who started it all, Eliezer, the opening act needed to be a shliach, the closing act also needs to be a shliach. Tomorrow we're going to explore in chapter 10 why. Now we'll understand why Mashiach is also a fusion of Moshe together with Mashiach. But we're going to leave that, Be'ez Hashem, for class number 5 in tomorrow's class. Thank you.